today I am going to be building up the fan shroud with the alternator that I've just bought. So I'm not using the alternator that's already on the engine. I've decided to keep that on the engine, so that's like a turnkey engine ready to go back in an emergency. If this engine works out really well, then I might sell that engine, or I might keep it so I can sell it, put it in the bus to sell the bus in future. I don't know. I'll probably just put it into deep storage, all wrapped up in a bag, and just leave it ready as a runner, ready to go back into any vehicle, well, any bus really. So I have got a new alternator and it's just turned up. I'm waiting for some other parts to come, which should be coming today. So let's have a look at what I've got in the first box. So here's the box. I actually got this on a pretty good deal. They were on offer, which is what sort of made me change my mind. I thought, well, you know, like, so look, once I take the motor out of the existing bus, there's a lot to do already without having to worry about taking the alternator off. So 2 parts here. This will be the sort of like hub, I imagine, yeah. So this is original, well, not an original, this is a German VW part, so that should fit nicely. So that keys into the fan on the alternator shaft. It's one of those. Best quality fan nut. And this supplier, Heritage Parts, didn't have the wavy lock washer, and they didn't have the spacers, so or the Woodruff keys. So I bought those from Just Campers. Here is the alternator. Oh. There it is. Brand spanking new. This is great. It means I better get the fan on, the fan shroud on. Oh, come on out. Then we can look at balancing the, setting the carbs up a bit better. Ah, so I bought some Woodruff keys, and the alternator comes with Woodruff keys. So there we go. Come with some nuts and some lock washers, which we don't need. So there we go. Standard alternator. Let's hope it works, because some of these aftermarket parts can be a bit dodgy, can't they? With that in mind, I will keep the box so we can return it if we need to, and I'll keep the receipt in the box. So the fan I bought off CB Performance, which is apparently a later fan, which is slightly deeper and blows more air, which is great. I've got it out of the packet. I've not opened it before. It's all wrapped up in cling film, and it's just bare metal, so that's going to go rusty as hell. So I'm going to give it a dust with some primer, and then give it a coat with some just rattle can satin. I mean, no one's ever going to see it. It's around the back of the engine, or the front of the engine, but you know, I don't want it to go rusty and start blowing bits of rust all over the engine, the fins of the cylinders and stuff. So just going to give it a paint first. I've just got out the bus manual. It's just a Haynes one, just to refresh my memory on the order and how they go on. So first thing that goes on to the alternator, well, that's obviously a dynamo on the alternator, is the strap, which is coming from the other company. Then the two plates in that order. Then the special hub. Then the shims, because you want about, I think it's, I have to look it up, I think it's like 2 mil clearance from the fan to the engine tin. These are new engine tins, so they should be straight. Sometimes I've noticed with older parts that it's slightly distorted, and as you turn the fan round, it gets closer and further away. So the closest you want is 2 millimeters. Then the lock washer, then the special nut. So I can't actually do anything until the other parts turn up, apart from I can attach this hub to the alternator. So Woodruff keys there, and it goes on, so it's got like a keyed face and a non-keyed face. The non-keyed face goes towards the alternator. And there you go. That went on nice and easily. The joy of new parts. Sometimes they go together well. So that's it. That's all I can do until the other parts show up. So I've just whapped the alternator in a vise, in a rag, and the other parts shown up, which is good news. So alternator strap. Put that on. Hope that works. Next on is the backing plate. I'm not sure where the hole goes. I always put the hole on the bottom. I assume it goes there. Then you've got this tin here. I imagine that acts as like a spacer. And then we have this tin, and the vent goes on the bottom. Then we want some lock nuts. M6. There's one. Stainless parts, always. Some washers. Ah, that nut's stripped. Is that the thread? I think that's a dodgy stud. Let's try a different nut. Let's try a non-nylock. Yeah, that is knackered. Great. Joy of joys. Oh, it's nothing easy. It's not going to go, is it? I'm not sure how that works, because I know on a dynamo this is a stub which runs the whole length of the dynamo. On an alternator, it doesn't. Yeah, it's not going to come out. It's a bolt. Maybe clean the thread up. With a file. So I've got it starting, but it's catching again, and it's just winding this bolt in. So I'm going to have to try and get a double nut it and then tighten that bolt from the inside, so to speak. So I've managed to get 2 non-nylock nuts on there, double nutted them, and I'm just going to really tighten down this bolt from inside. There we go. Hopefully that'll do the trick. So, thread cleaned up. We put the alternator strap on. What were we doing? Some engine tins to go on. Backing plate spacer thingy. I must admit, missed out before. Did a build a few years ago, and wrong way around. Did a build a few years ago, and I found it on the workbench. I'm like, oh, that motor ran for years, not a problem. So I know how much it's needed. It wasn't a powerful motor though, so it wasn't requiring top-notch cooling. Right, washers. Nylock. That one just spins on easy. Washer. This is all nicely together. Got so many tools on the bench now. I don't know where my other nylock is. There it is. See if it behaves itself. Yep, what's going on? On a stock motor, it's just lock washers, not nylocks. But as there's nylocks all over this engine, I'm not a fan of nylocks. If I'm doing like a stock motor, I can put a nylock near it. But as it's not a stock motor, and they are very good at what they do. Right, I'm just going to pause the video because I'm going to tidy up. I don't know about you guys, but I hate having loads of tools all over my workbench when I'm working on something if they're not needed. So I keep quite, it looks like a bit of a mess, but it's actually relatively tidy. Just the tools I'm going to need for the job. I don't need this, and that's still there, it's winding me up. So the next thing is a spacer shim. So it's like the lock washer, but it's flat. The lock washer is a wavy washer, so that goes on, hopefully. Doesn't need filing. Oh dear Lord. Panel hammer, it's not what you should be using, is it? No. So, bit by piece. So the original VW piece fits on brilliantly. Aftermarket, spacer shim doesn't want to go on there at all. So it's, just by looking at it, it's generally always the flats. So I'm going to get a file out and just file the flats down a little bit so it goes on. I also got the CB Performance pulley out of its packet today, with its fancy CB nut, and it's a nice piece, but when I got it out of the packet I had a hell of a job separating the two pulley halves. So if you look inside, I took off all the paint on the inside and had to file out the straight edges on here. I actually used 80 grit sandpaper so that they could go on. So when you're adjusting tension on your fan belt, and your fan belt gets looser and you want to put a few less shims in to tighten it up, you want to be able to take this off easily without having to get a puller out the drawer and damaging the paint on the edges. So similar procedure for this shim. So shim filed, fits on nicely now. Actually it's a little bit loose, filed too much, but doesn't matter. It's just there as a spacer. And next up we have a bunch of shims. I've got 5, I'm not sure how many are supposed to be there, but we're going to try 3. start with. The shims go on. The shims don't fit either. Yes, they do. The shims do fit. Then we have the fan, which we painted. Or maybe it's this new VW part that's crap then, because the fan doesn't fit either. This does need to be a pretty true fit. There you go, it's gone on. Need a bit of love. And we can hear. That is definitely rubbing. And this is a brand new fan, and I can see the gap's changing, so it's touching here. Just here. So, get that off. Oh, of course. The hubs come off with it. Of course that's what's going to happen. So, I was going on about how brilliant this hub is. So we're going to try 5 of these shims. Quite springy. That looks pretty good. We don't know though until we tighten it down. So we have the spring washer. See, it's a wavy type. Goes on like this. And then the special nut, which has got like a groove around the side of it. Don't tell me this thread's messed up too. Shouldn't be. Eventually this nut has to be torqued down to 43 foot-pounds according to Haynes. CB Performance. I know J-Bugs. I was looking at the J-Bugs site because they've got a handy torque setting. And they were saying 42. So I'm going to go with Haynes. So I just put a nut on the other side, and then hand tighten this down a bit. Yeah, that needs to be tightened quite a bit because it's all a bit skewy. What is going on there? I'm just going to have to up one up the other end. To explain what I'm doing here now, I'm trying to get that nut off now. Why am I trying to get that nut off? Because I think the spring washer has slipped. The spring washer keys to the, come on. There you go. Spring washer keys to the hub as well, and I think that slipped. Yeah, it slipped. So see, if you can see, it's keyed, and that'll just come off. Just annoying. So I'll do that. That is supposed to be 36. You can see it very, very nearly fits, but it's just not fitting that socket. Like anybody who's into VWs, I've got a whole bunch of 36. So I'm just going to have to fudge it. Well, I've got a 38 there. I'm going to have to fudge it with a 38. none of the 36s fit. The nut's just a little bit bigger than 36. So thanks Aftermarket Parts for your shitness. So we're just going to tighten this down a little bit. Got a span on the other end. Okay, starting to tighten those. So you just snug this down. Obviously not torquing it. Then we have a look. It hasn't got to be that precise. You're not going to get. It's about 2 mil. And it opens up to 3 as it goes round and then comes back down to 2. Oh no, there I'd say, oh yeah, 2 mil. So there we go. So we used all 5 shims in the end. So now we're going to torque it. And what I do is, I've got a nut on the other end. And I'm just going to put a spanner on that nut and put the spanner on the bench. Is it going to be long enough? Maybe not. There we go. That is locked. And we'll get the torque wrench out. My torque wrench is handily not marked up in feet pounds, it's marked up in inch pounds. I mean, why? Why? This is going to be funny because I've got the 36 doesn't fit. Let's hope you don't mash up this nut trying to torque it with a 38 mil socket rather than the correct one. Right, see if those days in the gym have been kind to me. Now that has moved a lot closer. Don't like that. That's fine. Just pulled the tin back a bit. Sure, that's cheating. There we go. Ooh, cool breeze. Oh, nice. Right, that is that. So as with everything in the world of VW engine building, it seems to me nothing goes together easy, especially if you're using aftermarket parts. I mean, if you're thinking of doing an engine, then I would highly suggest getting a pretty decent one that's an original one and stripping it down, refurbing it and putting it back together, because then everything just goes together a lot easier than when you're using all these aftermarket parts. I mean, aftermarket fan, aftermarket tins, aftermarket alternator, aftermarket fasteners and hubs and stuff. And none of it really goes together. There are individual companies making these things rather than one company making them and making sure they all work together. So yes, next job is to attach alternator to the fan, which is always a nice thing to do. And then after that, we have the age-old struggle of man versus fan shroud trying to attach to engine. Always fun. It'd be fun for you to watch me struggle with that. I hate that job. Right, let's bolt this bad boy up. Get out the vice. So it just sits on like this. Turns nicely. And then I'm not sure, I think stock they had M6 bolts, set screws rather, or whatever you call them. But I like to use well, sometimes I use bolts, but I'm using engine tins because I can tighten these up without damaging the powder coat. And I'm using, to keep it looking a bit stealth, I'm using black stainless. I mean, I am using silver stainless on the other parts of the engine. In some parts I'm using black stainless, like underneath. I've used a couple of black stainless, and I'll be using black stainless on the sides here as well, just to keep the fan a little bit less complicated looking. Yeah, they kind of melt away, these ones. Got them on eBay. Not even sure who was selling them. Get nice and tight. Slipping. Probably should get some, end of my screwdriver's quite rounded off. Should probably get some new drivers. Bad workman blames his tools, right? There we go. So that is alternator bolted up. So we'll look at the other side. Bags of room, and I'm really glad I ended up painting that. So it's nice and black. Not that you ever see it, but it'll prevent corrosion. So now the fun part starts. It's putting this on the engine. It's difficult enough without the alternator in, but when you've got the alternator and it's trying to tip up and it's really heavy and you're trying to lift it around and get the tins all in the right place to button it down, it's a real pain in the arse. And then I've got to get the screws in, and I had the carbs off yesterday when I was cutting down the engine tins. I should have left the carbs off because it makes that job a lot easier, it makes the whole thing a lot easier. So I'll try it with the carbs on, but I might end up taking the carbs off again. Well, believe it or not, and that was actually easier than I thought it was going to be. It's not over yet though. So we have to now attach this. It's really this strap is really the thing that holds it all down. It's the thing that holds it all down, really. It's a nice strap. I've not used one of these before. It's stainless steel. It's got a really nice clasp on it. Let's see if it does the trick. I'll get an extension on my 10mm and we'll tighten it up. Keep testing the fan, because as you tighten these things down it can start to distort this tin, cause rubbing. I'm just going to soak it all off, put more shims in, so it's a bit more than 2mm. There you go, you hear that? So that is the fan rubbing after it's been tightened down. So, I'll take the whole thing apart. I'll have to dig out some shims. I'm pretty sure I've got some of these shims knocking around somewhere. If not, I'll have to order some. Off you come. So, fan shroud's back on, turning with no rubbing, and I ended up putting 3 more shims in. I couldn't find any shims, but the CB Performance top pulley comes with the pulley shims, and it comes with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it should be 10, and I put 3, and I spaced it out so its narrowest point it was like 3.5mm. And to be fair, sorry, the narrowest point is 2mm, and the widest point is about 3.5mm. And to be fair, when I went back and looked at it before I took it all apart again, it probably was like 1.25mm at its narrowest. So measure twice, cut once, that's what they say, isn't it? So I should have double checked that. So anyway, it's back on. And all I need to do now is attach some bolts here and here, which will be fiddly. Again, I'm going to use these black stainless penny washers, because they would always work best on these things on the sides. And I've got a couple in here of M6 10 across the flat black stainless, which I've been saving just for this job. So we'll see if we can get these in, and then it'll be a slow process of doing them up with a spanner. Well, that's going in nice and easy on that side. That's because I cleaned up the threads before we put it all together, which makes a huge difference. See if this side goes in as well, easy. I'm not sure this side aligns as well as that side. Well, I never. It's always the way, isn't it? The jobs you think are going to be really tricky turn out to be really easy. And the other jobs, like bolting the fan together, you think it's going to be relatively straightforward. You've done it a bunch of times. Well, it's actually hard. So 10mm. So this will be a long, boring. I can't get a ratchet in there. And I haven't got. Well, I've got a set of ratchet ring spanners, but the head on them are so big The heads on them are so big, they usually they wouldn't fit in here. So I need to get myself a decent, slim, ratchet ring head spanners. Though I do love a classic spanner. And that is that. That is the fan shroud on. Hopefully that will never ever have to come off again. Famous last words. 10 days from now I'll be taking it off for some obscure reason. Right, next thing to put on is the top pulley and the foam belt. Gotta somehow get that off, haven't I? Is it going to come off easy? I've got a nut on there which I put on to torque the... Give me 1 minute. This is where I can't get this nut off and I have to take the fan shroud off. Please just come off. Coming off. Not easily. Hope I haven't damaged the spindle thread. Yeah, the thread looks good on the spindle. I think cheap old bolt nut rather. Couldn't hack the 43 foot-pounds. That's fine. Also looks fine. Put it in the bin anyway. Right, so let's see how well this fits. We'll drop a key. Very loose woodruff key. The other side was nice and tight. It's flipping up. There we go. That was a nice fit. Right then. Just excuse me for a minute because I've got to find the fan belt. I don't know what I have done with it. So this fan belt, as supplied by CB Performance, power rated, made in Mexico. It's one they recommend, hard wearing, and it's going to work with a performance engine. Why is that not going on? That is a tight fit. Right, so as you know, number of shins dictates how loose and how tight you want your pulley. I'm going to guess that we're going to start with 5, so that would be half the stack. So you put 5 on there. And you put the other half of the pulley on, which now fits beautifully. Then remaining shims go underneath your little cap. And then there's this very lightweight aluminum nut, which reminds me of early Porsche aluminum wheel nuts, which strip like crazy. So what do you reckon that is? Looking at 17? Looks smaller than 17. Bigger than 17. Where's my 19? Can't be 19. It is 19. It's black anodized, so I'm going to be really careful to not. But I can see already that's not going to be enough shims. I'll see when it tightens down. So I've got the flywheel locking nut on, which will stop bottom pulley turning. It's been on for ages, I don't know why I've got it on. Starting to look like a VW engine now. That is a wee bit too tight for me. I mean, maybe not actually. Depends how. I mean, you're supposed to have like an inch of squish, but is that an inch between here and here, or is it an inch travel there? I never know. I mean, it's definitely around about an inch from there to there, so maybe that's good. So I've got the flywheel locking device off, and the fan is trapping the bolt. So when I said I wouldn't have to take the fan off, I was right, because I'm not gonna take the fan off. I'm gonna sacrifice this bolt, and I'm gonna cut the bolt. Don't mess about. Cut the bolt off and keep the fan on after all of that. I can really feel the compression on this thing. Here it's sucking and blowing. That is hard to turn over. I mean, obviously it was fine before it sealed it all up. Now it's not breathing. It's, whoa. Right, okay. So that's it. Fan shroud on, top pulley on, and alternator on. Next job I'll do is I'll continue with the carb linkage, and I'll get these all measured up properly, and I'll get the geometry on this working really well. And obviously that will have to be fine-tuned again once it's in the car and it's running. So anyway, fan shroud on. Thanks for watching.